Thanks to Jared Kushner, and I really am grateful for this, thanks to Jared Kushner, who the president believes is the smartest person in the White House, we now have a transcript of President Trump's conversation with the president of Mexico that proves Donald Trump lies about what he really thinks about Mexico paying for the Trump wall on our southern border. Jared Kushner thought it would be a good idea for his father-in-law to get on the phone with the president of Mexico. It was a terrible idea, as the transcript shows. But we should all be grateful to Jared Kushner for arranging this phone call that we now have, this stunning transcript leaked by the Trump White House 3 days after General John Kelly became the chief of staff of that White House in a move targeted specifically to stop leaks like this. In the transcript, the president of Mexico says exactly what you expect he would say. We find this completely unacceptable for Mexicans to pay for the wall that you are thinking of building. President Trump desperately tries to get the president of Mexico to simply stop talking about the wall. And President Trump promises that he, in turn, will stop talking about the wall. Trump said, if you're going to say that Mexico is not going to pay for the wall, then I do not want to meet with you guys anymore because I cannot live with that. I am willing to say that we will work it out, but that means it will come out in the wash, and that is okay, but you cannot say anymore that the United States is going to pay for the wall. I am just going to say that we are working it out. Believe it or not, this is the least important thing that we are talking about. But politically, this might be the most important. Every Trump voter was told that the most important thing with Mexico was Mexico paying for the wall. A complete lie. The Mexican president says, my position has been and will continue to be very firm, saying that Mexico cannot pay for that wall. To which Donald Trump immediately says, but you cannot say that to the press. The press is going to go with that, and I cannot live with that. Donald Trump thinks it's perfectly reasonable for the Mexican president to tell him that he's not going to pay for the wall. Donald Trump knows Mexico won't pay for the wall. He just doesn't want the president of Mexico to tell Trump voters that he's not going to pay for the wall. President Trump then spends considerable time demonstrating how little he understands about the American government. He tries to threaten the president of Mexico with taxes. Trump said, I am very happy to not have any more meetings and just put a border tax on. The president of Mexico is no doubt sitting there thinking what we all know, which is that Congress is never going to pass that. So Donald Trump says, I have been given as president tremendous taxation powers for trade and for other reasons, far greater than anybody understands. The powers of taxation are tremendous for the president of the United States. And if you study that, you will see what I mean. The president of Mexico, of course, has already studied that and knows that the president of the United States has no such power. And so the tough guy who is going to push around the president of Mexico in his phone call is the weak guy issuing empty threats that the president of Mexico knows are empty, and the tough guy is begging the president of Mexico to just please stop talking about the wall. NAFTA is a three-country agreement, Mexico, the United States, and Canada. And when the president of Mexico mentioned Canada, President Trump said, Canada is no problem. Do not worry about Canada. Do not even think about them. We have had a very fair relationship with Canada. We do not have to worry about Canada. We do not even think about them. Don't even think about Canada, except when President Trump goes to a Canadian border state, Wisconsin, and lies to the voters there about Canada.
In Canada, some very unfair things have happened to our dairy farmers and others. What's happened to you is very, very unfair. It's another typical one-sided deal against the United States, and it's not going to be happening for long.
Canada is no problem. Do not worry about Canada. Don't even think about them.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.